I came home on a Tuesday afternoon. The taxi driver helped me with my bags. But when we reached my front door, something felt wrong. My favorite rocking chair sat on the grass. My quilt was folded on top of a cardboard box. My teacups were wrapped in newspaper and placed beside the mailbox. I stood there confused. Why were my things outside? Then I saw a piece of paper taped to my jewelry box. It was from Tommy, my son. The note said, "Sorry, Mom. No space for you anymore." Just those words. Nothing else. My heart felt heavy, like a stone had dropped inside my chest. I didn't understand. This was my home. I raised Tommy here. I painted these walls. I planted the roses in the garden. But now my things were on the lawn like unwanted trash. Have you ever felt like you don't matter anymore? Like people forgot you were important? That's how I felt standing there that day. The neighborhood was quiet. Nobody came outside to ask if I needed help. The sky was turning orange and purple as the sun went down. I sat on my rocking chair right there on the grass. I didn't cry. I just sat and looked at the house. The curtains were closed. No lights turned on inside. I remembered when Tommy was small. He would run to me when I came home. He would hug my legs and smile so big. Where did that little boy go? I picked up my jewelry box and held it close. Inside were my wedding ring and a bracelet Tommy made for me in 2nd grade. It had wooden beads painted blue and yellow. I wore it every Mother's Day. Now I wondered if he even remembered making it. A neighbor's cat walked by and rubbed against my leg. Even the cat seemed to know something was wrong. I finally stood up and gathered my things. I couldn't stay on the lawn forever. I needed a plan. But first I needed to understand what had happened while I was away. I walked slowly down the street, pulling my suitcase behind me. The wheels made a clicking sound on the sidewalk. I didn't know where to go. So I went to the park where Tommy used to play when he was little. There was a bench under a big oak tree. I sat down and tried to think. An old man was feeding pigeons nearby. He looked at me and nodded. "Tough day?" he asked. I nodded back. "Very tough," I said. He didn't ask more questions. Sometimes quiet kindness is the best kind. I stayed on that bench until the streetlights came on. Then I remembered something important. Years ago, before Tommy got married, I had rented a small apartment above the bakery on Main Street. I used it as my sewing room. I would go there to make quilts and curtains. It was my quiet place. I still had the key on my keychain. I hadn't been there in so long. But maybe, just maybe, it was still mine. I stood up, thanked the old man, and walked toward Main Street. My legs were tired, but my mind was clear. I had a place to go. The bakery was closed for the night. But the side door that led upstairs was unlocked. I climbed the narrow steps slowly. Each step creaked under my feet. When I reached the top, I put the key in the lock. Turned. The door opened. Inside, everything was covered in dust. But it was still there. My sewing machine sat by the window. Boxes of fabric were stacked in the corner. An old couch with faded flowers faced the wall. I turned on the light. The bulb flickered but stayed on. I set my suitcase down and sat on the couch. Dust puffed up around me. This wasn't much. But it was mine. Nobody could take it away. I opened my suitcase and took out my pajamas. Then I found some old sheets in a closet and made a bed on the couch. That night I didn't sleep well. But I felt safe. In the morning I would start figuring things out. I would find out why Tommy did this. I would learn what happened to my house. But tonight I just rested. Sometimes that's all you can do when your world turns upside down. The next morning I woke up to the smell of fresh bread from the bakery below. My back hurt from sleeping on the old couch. But I got up and looked out the window. People were walking to work. Kids were going to school. Life was moving forward like nothing had happened. I washed my face in the tiny bathroom and combed my hair. Then I went downstairs and bought a muffin and some coffee from the bakery. The young woman at the counter smiled at me. "Haven't seen you in a while," she said. "I've been away," I told her. She didn't ask more. I sat at a small table by the window and ate slowly. While I sat there, I saw Tommy's car drive past. He was going to work. His wife, Jessica, was in the passenger seat. She was laughing about something. They looked happy. They looked like people who didn't have a care in the world. My chest felt tight. How could they be so happy when they had just thrown me out? I finished my coffee and decided I needed to talk to someone I trusted. Someone who would tell me the truth. I walked to the library. It was only 3 blocks away. Inside it was warm and quiet. I found a computer and sat down. I wasn't very good with computers, but I knew how to check my email. I had one new message. It was from my friend Donna. She lived 2 towns over. We used to work together at the school cafeteria years ago. Her email said, "Helen, I heard something strange. Someone told me your house is being sold. Is that true? Call me." My hands started shaking. Sold? How could my house be sold? I didn't agree to that. I built that house with my late husband, George. It was supposed to be mine forever. I closed the email and sat back in the chair. My mind was spinning. Then a librarian walked over. Her name was Sharon. I knew her because I used to bring Tommy here for story time. "Helen, are you okay?" she asked softly. I looked up at her. "Sharon, do you know any lawyers?" She nodded. "My cousin is a lawyer. She helps people with family problems. I can give you her number." I felt a tiny bit of hope. "Yes, please." Sharon wrote down the number on a piece of paper. Her cousin's name was Linda. I thanked Sharon and walked outside to use my phone. My hands were still shaking as I dialed the number. A kind voice answered. "This is Linda. How can I help you?" I took a deep breath. "My name is Helen. My son kicked me out of my house. And now I think he's trying to sell it. I don't know what to do." Linda was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Can you come to my office this afternoon? I'd like to talk to you in person." I agreed. She gave me the address. It wasn't far. I spent the rest of the morning walking around town, trying to calm down. I went to the park again. I sat on the same bench. I watched the ducks swimming in the pond. Everything looked so peaceful. But inside I felt like a storm was coming. At 2 o'clock, I walked to Linda's office. It was in a small building near the post office. I climbed the stairs and knocked on the door. Linda opened it with a warm smile. She was younger than me, maybe 50. She had kind eyes. Linda invited me to sit down. Her office was small but neat. There were files on the shelves and a picture of her family on the desk. She poured me a glass of water and sat across from me. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. I told her about coming home and finding my things on the lawn. I told her about Tommy's note. I told her about the email from Donna saying the house was being sold. Linda listened carefully. She didn't interrupt. She just nodded and took notes. When I finished, she looked at me with serious eyes. "Helen, do you own that house? Is your name on the paperwork?" I nodded. "Yes. My husband and I bought it together. When he died, it became mine. Tommy never owned it." Linda smiled a little. "Good. That's very good. Because if your name is on the deed, nobody can sell it without your permission. Not even your son." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Really? Really?" Linda said. "But we need to act fast. If Tommy is trying to sell the house, we need to stop him right away." She opened a drawer and pulled out some papers. "I'm going to help you." Linda explained everything in simple words. She said we needed to go to the county office and check the paperwork for my house. We needed to make sure nobody had changed anything without telling me. She also said we should send a letter to Tommy and Jessica. The letter would tell them they cannot sell the house because it belongs to me. Linda called it a legal warning. I liked that. Sounded strong. We left her office and walked to the county building together. Inside, there was a long counter with workers behind it. Linda walked up and asked to see the records for my house. The worker typed on her computer and printed out some papers. Linda read them carefully. Then she looked at me and smiled. "Your name is still on everything. Nobody has changed it." I felt so relieved I almost cried. But then Linda's face got serious again. "But Helen, someone did try. Look at this." She pointed to a date on the paper. 2 weeks ago, someone requested to change the ownership. The request was denied because they didn't have the right documents. But they tried. My stomach dropped. 2 weeks ago. That was while I was visiting my sister. Linda made copies of all the papers. Then we walked back to her office. She sat down at her computer and started typing. "I'm writing the letter now," she said. "We'll send it to Tommy today. He needs to know that what he's doing is wrong." I watched her type. Her fingers moved fast across the keyboard. I felt grateful but also sad. Sad that I needed a lawyer to deal with my own son. Sad that Tommy thought he could just erase me. Linda printed the letter and handed it to me. "Read it and tell me if it's okay." The letter was clear and strong. It said, "This house belongs to Helen. You cannot sell it. You cannot change the ownership. If you try, there will be serious legal trouble." He nodded. "It's perfect." Linda put the letter in an envelope and sealed it. Then she called a delivery service. "This will be delivered to Tommy's office tomorrow morning," she said. Thanked her. She held my hand for a moment. "Helen, you're doing the right thing. Don't let anyone make you feel bad for standing up for yourself." Those words gave me strength. That evening, I went back to my little apartment above the bakery. I made myself some tea and sat by the window. I watched the sun go down over the rooftops. The sky turned pink and gold. It was beautiful. But I didn't feel peaceful. I kept thinking about Tommy. Why did he do this? Was it his idea? Or was it Jessica's? I thought about Jessica. She always wanted a bigger house. She talked about it all the time. She would say things like, "Tommy, we need more space. We need a better kitchen. We need a bigger yard." Maybe she talked him into it. Maybe she made him believe that pushing me out was okay. But Tommy was a grown man. He could have said no. He could have protected me. Instead, he chose her over me. That hurt more than anything. I finished my tea and got ready for bed. Tomorrow, Tommy would get the letter. Tomorrow, everything would change. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew I wasn't giving up. This was my home, my life, and I was going to fight for it. The next day, I stayed close to my phone. I waited for Tommy to call. But he didn't. Not in the morning. Not in the afternoon. By evening, I started to wonder if he even got the letter. Then, just before dinner time, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Tommy. It said, "We need to talk. Can you meet us tomorrow?" I stared at the message. That meant Jessica would be there too. I didn't want to see her, but I knew I had to. I texted back, "Where and when?" He replied quickly, "Our house. 10 a.m. I almost laughed. A house. He called it our house like it was his. But I didn't argue. Not yet. I texted, "I'll be there." Then I called Linda and told her about the meeting. She said, "Do you want me to come with you?" Thought about it. Then I said, "Yes. I think that would be good." Linda agreed. "I'll meet you there at 10. Don't go inside without me." I felt better knowing she would be with me. I wasn't alone anymore. I had someone on my side. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what I would say to Tommy. I wanted to ask him why. Why did he hurt me like this? Why did he think it was okay to throw me out? But I also knew that sometimes there are no good answers. Sometimes people do bad things because it's easier than doing the right thing. I got up early the next morning and got dressed. I wore my best blue dress and my pearl necklace. George gave me those pearls on our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look strong. I wanted Tommy to see that I wasn't broken. At 9:30, I walked to the house. My house. Linda was already waiting outside in her car. She got out when she saw me. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded. "Ready." We walked up to the front door together. I knocked. Tommy opened it almost immediately. He looked surprised to see Linda. "Who's this?" he asked. Linda held out her hand. "I'm Linda, Helen's lawyer. She asked me to be here." Tommy's face turned red. But he stepped aside and let us in. Inside, Jessica was sitting on the couch. She looked at me with cold eyes. She didn't say hello. She just stared. Tommy closed the door and stood next to her. "Mom, we need to talk about the house," he said. I didn't sit down. I stood tall with Linda beside me. "Yes, we do," I said. "Because this is my house. Not yours." Jessica made a small noise like a laugh but meaner. "You can't take care of it anymore," she said. "You're too old. We're doing you a favor." I felt my face get hot. But Linda spoke before I could. "Excuse me," she said calmly. "But Helen is perfectly capable. And this house belongs to her legally. You have no right to sell it or make decisions about it." Tommy looked uncomfortable. We thought she'd be happier somewhere smaller. Somewhere easier. I finally spoke again. "You didn't ask me what would make me happy. You just decided for me. You threw me out like I was nothing." Jessica rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." Linda stepped forward. "No, she's not. What you did is called elder abuse. And it's illegal." The room went silent. Tommy looked at Jessica. Jessica looked at the floor. "We didn't abuse anyone," Tommy said quietly. Linda pulled out some papers from her bag. "You tried to change the ownership of this house without Helen's permission. That's fraud. You removed her belongings and locked her out. That's illegal eviction. You sent her a note saying there's no space for her. That's emotional harm." She set the papers on the coffee table. "These are copies of the county records. They show that someone tried to transfer this house 2 weeks ago. The request was denied. But the attempt was made." Tommy's face went pale. Jessica finally looked up. Her eyes were wide. "We were just trying to plan for the future," she said. Linda shook her head. "You were trying to steal. There's a difference." I looked at my son. Really looked at him. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Tommy," I said softly. "I loved you. I gave you everything. And you threw me away." He opened his mouth but no words came out. I turned to Linda. "What happens now?" She looked at Tommy and Jessica. "That depends on them." Linda explained the options. Tommy and Jessica could apologize and leave my house alone. Or I could take legal action and they could face serious trouble. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She just told the truth. Jessica stood up suddenly. "This is ridiculous. We were helping her." Linda remained calm. Helping her would mean asking her what she needs. Not deciding for her. Not taking her home away. Jessica looked at Tommy like she wanted him to say something. But he just sat there staring at his hands. Finally, she grabbed her purse. "I can't deal with this right now," she said. And she walked out. She slammed the door behind her. Tommy and I were left staring at each other. Linda gave us some space. She stepped into the kitchen. "Tommy," I said. "Why?" He looked up at me. His eyes were red. "She said it would be better. She said we needed the space. She said you wouldn't mind." I felt tears coming but I held them back. "And you believed her. You didn't even ask me." He didn't answer. He just put his head in his hands. I realized then that I couldn't fix this. Some things are broken forever. Linda came back into the room. "Tommy, you have 2 choices. You can sign a paper saying you will never try to take this house again. Or we can go to court." Tommy looked up at her. He looked tired. Defeated. "I'll sign," he said quietly. Linda pulled out another paper. It was a legal agreement. It said Tommy and Jessica had no claim to my house. It said they understood it belonged to me. It said they would never try to sell it or change the ownership. Tommy read it slowly. Then he signed it. Linda witnessed the signature and dated it. "This is now a legal document," she said. "If you break this agreement, there will be serious consequences." Tommy nodded. He looked at me one last time. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. But his words felt empty. Like he was saying them because he had to, not because he meant them. I didn't respond. I just turned and walked toward the door. Linda followed. As we stepped outside, I took a deep breath. The air felt lighter. I had won. But it didn't feel like winning. Just felt like surviving. Linda drove me back to the apartment above the bakery. We didn't talk much during the drive. When we arrived, she parked and turned to me. "Helen, you did something very brave today," she said. I shook my head. "I just protected myself. That's not brave. That's just necessary." Linda smiled. "Sometimes the same thing is both." I got out of the car and thanked her. She promised to call me in a few days to check on me. I climbed the stairs to my little apartment. Inside, I sat on the couch and finally let myself cry. I cried for the son I thought I had. I cried for the trust that was broken. I cried for the years I spent loving someone who could hurt me so easily. But after I cried, I felt something new. Felt free. Free from trying to please people who didn't value me. Free from pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. Free to live the rest of my life on my own terms. I made myself some tea and opened the window. A warm breeze came in. I could hear birds singing outside. It was just another day. But for me, it felt like a new beginning. Over the next few weeks, I settled into my new routine. I woke up early and had coffee at the bakery. I took walks in the park. I visited the library and read books I had always wanted to read. I started sewing again. I made a quilt with bright colors. Yellow, orange, and red. It reminded me of sunrises. One afternoon, Donna came to visit. She brought cookies and hugs. We sat in my little apartment and talked for hours. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "You stood up for yourself." Smiled. I had to. Nobody else was going to do it for me. Donna asked if I had heard from Tommy. I shook my head. "No. And I don't expect to." She squeezed my hand. "Maybe that's for the best." Maybe it was. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt sad. Sad that things turned out this way. But I also felt something else. Felt proud. Proud that I didn't give up. Proud that I fought back. Proud that I was still here, still standing, still living. That evening, after Donna left, I sat by the window and watched the sunset. The sky was painted with pink and purple. It was beautiful. And I realized something important. I didn't need a big house to be happy. I didn't need people who didn't respect me. I just needed myself. And that was enough. A month later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from a woman named Ruth. She wrote, "Dear Helen, I heard your story from my friend Sharon at the library. I wanted to thank you. My daughter was trying to take my house too. But after hearing what you did, I found a lawyer. I stood up for myself. And I won. You gave me courage." I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my jewelry box next to Tommy's wooden bracelet. That letter meant more to me than anything, because it showed me that my pain had purpose, that my fight had meaning. I wasn't just protecting myself. I was showing other people that they could protect themselves too. I decided to do something with my house. I couldn't live there anymore. Too many bad memories. But I didn't want to sell it either. So I talked to Linda. We came up with a plan. I would rent the house to someone who needed it. Someone who was struggling. Someone who deserved a safe place to live. Linda helped me find a young single mother named Clara. She had 2 kids and was working 2 jobs. She couldn't afford much. So I charged her very little rent. Just enough to cover the bills. When Clara moved in, she cried. She hugged me and said, "Thank you. You don't know what this means to us." But I did know. I knew what it felt like to need help. I knew what it felt like to be thrown away. And I knew what it felt like to be given a second chance. Clara and her kids made the house feel alive again. They painted the walls. They planted flowers in the garden. They filled the rooms with laughter. I visited them sometimes. Not too often. Just enough to see that the house was loved again. One day, Clara's daughter gave me a drawing. It was a picture of a house with a big heart on the door. At the bottom she had written, "Thank you for our home." I hung that drawing in my apartment. It reminded me every day that kindness matters. That standing up for yourself matters. That sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. I also started volunteering at the senior center. I talked to other older people who were facing similar problems. I shared my story. I told them about Linda. I helped them find lawyers and support. I became a voice for people who felt voiceless. One evening, I was at the senior center when a woman approached me. Her name was Pauline. She was older than me, maybe 75. She sat down next to me and said quietly, "My son took my car keys. He says I'm too old to drive. But I'm not. I'm fine. I don't know what to do." I looked at her. I saw myself in her eyes. That same confusion. That same hurt. I took her hand. "Let me help you," I said. And I did. I connected her with Linda. We fought to get her keys back. And we won. Pauline hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You saved me," she said. But I didn't save her. I just showed her that she could save herself. That's what I learned through all of this. We have more power than we think. We have more strength than we realize. We just have to be brave enough to use it. As the months went by, I started to heal. The pain of what Tommy did didn't go away completely, but it got smaller. It became something I carried instead of something that carried me. I made new friends, found new purpose, built a new life, and it was good. One day I was walking through the park when I saw Tommy. He was alone, sitting on a bench. He looked older somehow, tired. He saw me and stood up quickly. "Mom," he said. "Stop." I didn't run away. I just stood there. "Tommy," I said. He took a step toward me. "I've been wanting to talk to you. To apologize. Really apologize." I didn't say anything. He continued. "What I did was wrong. I know that now. Jessica and we're not together anymore." Left. She said I was too weak. Too soft. He looked down. Maybe she was right. I felt a twinge of sadness. But not for me. For him. "Tommy," I said gently. "You made your choice. You have to live with it." He nodded. Tears were in his eyes. "I know. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "I forgive you. But I can't forget. And I can't go back to the way things were." He nodded again. "I understand." We stood there in silence. Then I said, "Goodbye, Tommy." And I walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That chapter of my life was over. I had said what I needed to say. I had heard what I needed to hear. Now it was time to move forward. That evening I sat in my apartment and thought about everything that had happened. I thought about the day I came home and found my things on the lawn. I thought about the note. I thought about the fear and the anger and the sadness. But I also thought about the strength I found, the courage I discovered, the new life I built. I realized that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can also be the best thing. Not because it feels good, but because it forces you to change. It forces you to grow. It forces you to become who you were always meant to be. I looked around my little apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every chair, every cup, every picture on the wall. Nobody could take it from me. Nobody could push me out. I was safe. I was free. I was home. And that was the greatest victory of all. I continued my work at the senior center. More and more people came to me with their stories. They told me about children who stole from them, about relatives who lied to them, about systems that failed them. And I listened. Help. I connected them with resources. I fought alongside them. One woman, named Margaret, told me her grandson had taken her life savings. He promised to invest it for her. But he spent it all on himself. We worked together to report him. Took months, but we got her money back. Margaret cried when she got the check. "I thought I'd never see it again," she said. "Thank you. But I didn't do it alone. We did it together. That's what I learned. We're stronger together." Another woman, named Beverly, was being pressured to sign her house over to her daughter. The daughter said it was for tax purposes. But it wasn't. It was a lie. Beverly and I went to a lawyer. We stopped the transfer just in time. These stories kept coming. And I kept fighting. Because I knew what it felt like to be powerless. And I never wanted anyone else to feel that way. On my 70th birthday, the senior center threw me a party. There were balloons and cake and so many people. Ruth was there. The woman who had written me that first letter. Pauline was there. The woman whose car keys we got back. Clara came with her kids. They gave me flowers. Margaret, Beverly, and so many others. They all came. They sang Happy Birthday. They gave speeches. They called me a hero. But I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt like someone who refused to give up. Someone who decided that her life mattered. Someone who chose to fight. At the end of the party, Linda stood up and made a toast. To Helen, she said, who taught us all that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Everyone clapped. I felt tears in my eyes. But they were happy tears. I looked around the room at all these people. People whose lives had changed because I shared my story. People who had found their own strength. And I realized something beautiful. My pain had turned into purpose. My struggle had turned into strength. My story had turned into hope. For me and for so many others. As the party ended, I walked home slowly. The sun was setting. The air was warm. Passed by my old house. Clara's kids were playing in the front yard. They waved at me. "Hi, Miss Helen," they shouted. I waved back. I looked at the house. The house that had held so many memories. Good and bad. I didn't feel sad anymore when I looked at it. Felt peaceful. Because I knew it was being loved again. I reached my apartment and climbed the stairs. Inside, I made myself tea and sat by the window. I thought about the past year. About everything I had lost and everything I had gained. I had lost my son. At least, the version of him I thought I knew. I had lost my home. At least, the building. But I had gained something more valuable. I had gained myself. I had gained my voice. I had gained my power. And I had gained a community. People who cared. People who fought alongside me. People who reminded me every day that I mattered. I opened my journal. I had started writing in it months ago. Just little thoughts. Little memories. I turned to a fresh page and wrote, "Today I turned 70. And I am finally free." The next morning I got a phone call from a television station. They had heard about my story. They wanted to interview me. First I said no. I didn't want attention. But then I thought about all the women who were still suffering in silence. Women who didn't know they could fight back. Women who thought they were alone. So I said yes. The interview was scheduled for the following week. I was nervous. I had never been on television before. But Linda came with me. She helped me practice what I would say. When the day came, I wore my blue dress and my pearls again. The interviewer was kind. She asked me to tell my story. So I did. I told her about coming home and finding my things on the lawn. About Tommy's note. About feeling erased. But I also told her about fighting back. About finding Linda. About protecting my house. About helping others. When the interview aired, my phone didn't stop ringing. Women from all over called me. They wanted advice. They wanted help. They wanted to share their own stories. I talked to as many as I could. I listened. Cried with them. I cheered for them. I became part of something bigger than myself. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a conference. It was for lawyers who work with older people. They wanted me to share my experience. I was terrified. I had never spoken in front of so many people. But I did it. I stood at the podium and told my story. I talked about the fear, the shame, the anger. But I also talked about the strength, courage, the victory. When I finished, the room was silent. Then everyone stood up and clapped. Some people were crying. A young lawyer came up to me afterward. "Thank you," she said. "I needed to hear that. I work with so many clients like you. And sometimes I feel like I'm fighting alone. But you reminded me why I do this work." Hugged her. "You're not alone," I said. "None of us are." That day changed something in me. I realized that my story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt powerless. Everyone who had ever been hurt by someone they loved. Everyone who had ever had to choose between staying silent and speaking up. And I was honored to share it. Back at my apartment, I started writing a book. Just a simple book telling my story. I wanted people to know that it's never too late to fight back. That you're never too old to stand up for yourself. That your life always matters. I wrote every day. Sometimes just a few sentences. Sometimes whole pages. I wrote about my childhood. About George. About raising Tommy. About the good times and the bad times. I wrote about the day I found my things on the lawn. And I wrote about everything that came after. Took me 6 months to finish. When I was done, I showed it to Linda. She read it in one sitting. When she finished, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Helen, this is powerful. You need to publish this." I laughed. "I'm just an old woman. Nobody cares what I have to say." But Linda shook her head. "That's not true. Everyone needs to hear this." Linda helped me find a small publisher. They loved the book. They said it was honest and brave. 6 months later, my book was printed. It wasn't a big fancy book. Just a simple paperback with a picture of a sunrise on the cover. I called it Still Standing. The first copies arrived at my apartment on a rainy Tuesday. I held one in my hands and couldn't believe it. My story. My words. In a real book. The senior center hosted a book reading. I was so nervous my hands shook. But when I started reading, I forgot about my fear. I just told my story. When I finished, people asked questions. They wanted to know how I found the courage. They wanted to know what advice I had. I told them the truth. The courage was always there. I just had to choose to use it. And my advice is simple. Never let anyone make you feel like you don't matter. 'Cause you do. You always do. The book started selling. Not millions of copies. But enough. Enough that people were reading it. Enough that I started getting letters from readers. Women who said my story changed their lives. Women who said I inspired them to fight back. One letter came from a woman in another state. Her name was Alice. She wrote, "Dear Helen, I'm 82 years old. My nephew was trying to put me in a nursing home so he could sell my house. I didn't know what to do. Then I read your book. You gave me courage. Found a lawyer. I stopped him. I'm still in my house. And I'm still standing just like you. Thank you for sharing your story." I cried when I read that letter. Because that was exactly why I wrote the book. To help people like Alice. To show them they weren't alone. To give them hope. I wrote back to Alice. I told her how proud I was of her. I told her she was brave. I told her she mattered. We became pen pals. We wrote letters back and forth for months. She told me about her garden. I told her about the bakery. We shared recipes and memories and laughter. Even though we never met in person, she became my friend. That's what this journey taught me. Connection matters. Community matters. We need each other. Nobody can survive alone. We're stronger together. 2 years after everything happened, I was invited back to the house. Clara called me and said, "Miss Helen, we're having a garden party. Will you come?" Said yes. When I arrived, the yard was full of people. Clara's friends. Her neighbors. Some of the women from the senior center. Even Linda was there. The garden looked beautiful. The roses I had planted years ago were blooming. Clara had added sunflowers and daisies. There were tables with food and lemonade. Kids were running around playing tag. Felt like a real home. Warm and full of life. Clara pulled me aside. "Miss Helen, I want to show you something." She led me to the back corner of the garden. There was a small bench. Brand new. With a little plaque on it. The plaque read, "For Helen, who taught us that standing up for yourself is the bravest thing you can do." I couldn't speak. I just hugged Clara tight. "Thank you," I whispered. That day, surrounded by people who cared, I realized something important. I had lost a son. But I had gained a family. Family I chose. A family built on respect and love and mutual support. And that was worth everything. Now, as I sit in my apartment and look back on everything, I feel grateful. Grateful for the struggle because it made me stronger. Grateful for the pain because it taught me compassion. Grateful for the fight because it gave me purpose. I'm 72 now. My hair is completely white. My hands are wrinkled. But I feel more alive than ever. I still volunteer at the senior center. I still help women who are going through what I went through. I still write letters to Alice. I still visit Clara and her kids. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And that's all that matters. If you're reading this, if you're going through something similar, I want you to know something important. You are not alone. You are not powerless. You are stronger than you think. Stand up. Speak up. Fight back. Your life matters. Your voice matters. You matter. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Thank you for listening to my story. This is Helen from Granny's Voice. Still standing. Still fighting. Still here.